Great. So I'm going to get started with our introductions here. So welcome everyone to the Tory Burch Foundation Small Business Webinar Series. My name is Sahara Lake. I'm the programs manager with the foundation, and I'm so excited to have Kelly Lyons here with us today for this great conversation. So Kelly is the founder of Lyons, which is a business storytelling and development agency. Kelly is an investor and operator who has worked with a variety of really incredible clients, such as Chelsea Clinton, Bain Capital, Billboard Music, and hundreds of other startups who have received funding from investors such as RRE, Graycroft, and USV. Kelly herself is an entrepreneur and has built and launched and run businesses that have raised over $4 billion in equity capital across Wall Street, Fortune 500, and startups. And I'm also really excited to welcome Kelly because she has been working closely with us on the foundation side and is a key member of our community, working with the women founders and entrepreneurs that are in our fellowship program. And so today, Kelly is going to be teaching all of us how to create a compelling brand pitch deck and how to modify it for buy-in with customers, partners, and investors. Before we get to the conversation today, just a few housekeeping things. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please be sure to use the Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to as many questions at the end during the Q&A portion. And lastly, before I get started, I want to thank our sponsor for this series, Campaign Monitor. This series is entirely free for small business owners, and we started it at the beginning of COVID, and we are keeping it going through the end of the year, and we are able to do that with sponsorship through Campaign Monitor. So I just want to give a shout out and a big thanks to them. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Sahara. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. We have, I was just saying, material that we could spend a few days working through. We're going to cover it in 30 to 40 minutes. So I will speak fast. You'll have access to the presentation afterwards. So you can take notes if you want, or you can go back and look at the webinar after the fact. And I think I'll just get right into it and share my screen. Okay. All right, so my bio was covered, but the long and short of it is I worked in Wall Street and as an investor for 7 years. I then started working with small businesses and startups through my company Lyons. And really the core of what I do at Lyons is offering the same type of services that Morgan Stanley was offering massive blue chip companies to startups and small businesses. So a lot of people don't realize, but some of the main things you do as an investment banker is just create pitch decks. So I got a crash course in pitch deck creation, and that's what I'm going to teach to you. There's a few different approaches, but I just want to share my general approach to creating a pitch deck. And by the way, there's a couple different types of pitch decks, and we're going to cover probably 2 today, maybe 3. We'll see how much time we have, but my same general approach applies to any type of pitch deck. So I always like to begin with interviewing myself. So generally a pitch deck, while some people say they want a standard company pitch deck, that kind of exists, but I'd actually say that you are always using your pitch deck for a specific purpose, whether that is to convince your board of directors that you're performing well, convince investors to invest, convince customers to buy your product, convince corporate partners to sponsor you or do a partnership with you, or convince someone to invest in your foundation. There should always be a goal with any pitch deck, which is, what am I trying through this presentation to convince someone of? And in order to figure out—
Kelly, before you get a little farther along, can you make your deck full screen so that everyone can see nice and clearly? Perfect. Thank you.
So before you get started, you should really figure out, first off, what topic are you covering? So in this webinar, we're going to focus mostly on a sales deck, because in my mind, that really is more of a typical general corporate overview deck, would usually be used in sales. But then I'm also going to show you how to modify a sales deck for a corporate partnerships deck, for an investor deck. And then I just listed on here a few other reasons you might use a company pitch deck, We won't cover those specifically in here, but I think from this webinar, you'll get the general gist of how to create one. And we did some polling before, and I heard that people want to spend more time on sales and corporate partnerships. So that's what we'll focus on today. Now, taking it back, basically, when I'm sitting down to write a pitch deck, let's say I'm doing this from scratch, I'm really asking myself, what is my goal with this pitch deck? And then in order to basically answer all the questions that I'm going to want to be answered via the pitch deck for the customer or client, I just interview myself. So after this slide, I'll go through the questions that I use to interview myself. But really, I interview myself or my client in a complete stream of conscious. So if I'm working with a client, I'll let them ramble on. I'll spend maybe 2 hours interviewing them and just writing down almost 10 pages of copy. Then once I've asked them all the questions or feel I've gotten sufficient answers to the questions, I'll start copywriting it. So I'll start organizing by topic, asking myself, what is the order of the slides that I want to use, cutting back extra information, deleting extra words, and really copywriting that stream of conscious. Then the third step is storyboarding. So figuring out, okay, I'm covering these 15 topics. How should I order it? So I'll show you my suggested order, but it's definitely nuanced per the company and per the opportunity. Maybe this little bit like competition is more interesting in the front because you just are killing the competition. Whereas in another different example, maybe competition you bury in the back because it's a very competitive market. So once you see my outline, you'll have a little bit better sense of how you start storyboarding for topic. But then once you've storyboarded and contented everything that you want on the slides, then I worry about design last. So for me, I get messed up if I try to think about design while I'm writing and creating. So usually once the content is done, I recommend then going through design. Obviously, you could hire a professional designer or a firm like us, or you can design it yourself with some basic standard tidbits, which making sure all your fonts are the same, colors are the same, text is aligned, and it just looks pleasing to the eye. In my opinion, design is super important because I think it's 80% of the information received by the brain is processed visually. So if you're in a pitch meeting and you want to convince someone of something, if your slides are organized really nicely, it's just going to help them believe you better. So now we're going to dive into this interview yourself and the questions that you should ask for almost any pitch that you're writing. So this is any pitch deck. I don't care who you are pitching to. Basically, what I believe are the questions you should ask yourself in the stream of conscious, and then the questions that should be answered in the deck. Now, this might go without saying, but in the deck, you're not writing the question and then the answer. The point is that you're just covering all the questions that this party is probably going to have in a compelling sort of offensive approach. And then the hope is, of course, they're going to have certain questions at the end, but any question that could reasonably be guessed that they're going to have, you're going to nail it and answer it so that actually in an ideal world, they might have 0 to minimal questions at the end of the pitch. The number one thing you want to avoid is having them being confused or having some burning questions as you're going through the pitch. That's them preventing them from really understanding what you're trying to say. So here are some of the core questions. The most important question is, what am I trying to convince this party of? And why should they say yes? And there shouldn't just be one reason. There should be probably 5 reasons. Now, maybe 3 are strong and 2 are weak, but you should still think through, if you were up on a debate podium, what are your core reasons for convincing this party to say yes to whatever it is you're asking? And then assuming you have had some preliminary conversations with similar parties or maybe even mentors, asking yourself what aspects of this pitch or this business deal have been compelling to any early exploratory conversations and what haven't been. And by the way, if there are a few key things that have not been compelling, then what you want to figure out is what is the mitigant to those few key things. So say, for example, they have supply chain risk because you're a small company selling into Target, and Target is afraid that if they place a purchase order, you won't be able to fulfill it. it's a natural concern, then you should figure out how you can guarantee, at least via storytelling and this pitch deck, that that won't happen. Maybe your manufacturer has a 99% accuracy rate, or they've never been late on an order, or you're targeting to fulfill the order a month in advance to prevent for any shortcomings. So always thinking about the mitigant to any potential risk in the deal. Few more questions. What are the burning questions this party will have? So again, if it's Target, they probably are going to have some serious questions, maybe about the quality of your product, making sure the product does what it actually says it does, and the manufacturing, making sure that it will be delivered on time to Target's customers. Another good thing to hit is, what unique and insider information do you have? Is there anything that you know about your company or your product that someone else doesn't know? That's really a big value unlock, especially for corporate partners or investors, if you know something that other people don't know, because that's hard to replicate. How does your business generate revenue? That's something that will come up in a lot of pitch decks. Obviously, if you sell products, it's pretty straightforward, but still, someone will probably want to see your SKU list and the corresponding prices. What does your company do, and why, and how does it do it better? That's something that will often come up, probably in every pitch deck. And then we already covered what are the top risks or reasons preventing someone from saying yes, and how I will mitigate those. And then lastly, even if the party says yes, what are any outstanding fears or concerns or risks they might have? And how can I get ahead of that to make the onboarding process even easier? So this is the interview yourself portion, right? So you've just interviewed yourself all these questions. And then you start copywriting and buttoning up, because I'm sure you rambled on and you want to keep it really tight. And now we're going to storyboard. So I'll make a suggestion for you about my sort of classic storyboard for a sales deck, a corporate deck, very quickly an investor deck. So this is how, if I'm working with a client, for example, I interview them the questions, and then I'll go through my sales deck outline, and I'll just look through each of these bullets and think, okay, is there something here that hasn't just naturally fallen out of these questions? And if so, let me ask them questions to get to them. So if you're doing this yourself, you would do the same thing. So what problem am I trying to solve? What is the solution to that problem? And how am I delivering it? What's the secret sauce with my solution, and how does it work? Now, also taking it a step further, not only am I making this up and saying how it works, here's actual customer results of it working in action. Better yet, here's some quotes from notable customers. And perhaps you have 3 consumers, or perhaps you're a business that has different styles and types of customers that you would pull quotes from, or maybe you have a corporate partner that you would pull a quote from. And then showing the product offering and how it works and how it's used, any additional extra upsides or features, a way to show that you have traction, meaning you're not just idea, you actually have sales, customers, you're in stores, user engagement, numbers like that. And then sort of your pricing revenue model, how to sign up, key next steps, and the team. So all these bullets in front of you in my brain are typically 1 slide per bullet. And you can see where the questions that we just asked ourselves aren't so explicit in this bulleted outline, but we want to make sure that we cover the answers to all of those questions, what I call kind of just sneakily, through our sales deck. So you might start writing out all the bullets of your sales deck, and then flip over to your Q&A that you have with yourself and think, how can I sneak this in under solution? Or how can I include this in and make this point under customer quotes, for example? And it's really important also, my approach, just so you know, for pitching is that you're live pitching this to someone. So I don't put just images like you might see in a demo day deck. I put sort of a mix of images and text. I want the person in front of me to see visually and hear me at the same time, but then also be able to keep this deck afterwards if they are, let's say, writing up an investment memo or writing up a proposal to their boss to go ahead and use your solution. So that's the level of detail that we're going for. Then I'm just going to briefly show you my outline for a corporate partnership deck, and then next an investor deck, and just very high level basically say what the difference is between the 2 slides. So For our sales deck, we're really just covering a simplified version of any external information that anyone would need to know in order to be interested in buying our products. Now, the difference between a sales deck and a corporate partnerships deck is that you're not really convincing that partner to buy a product, but you're convincing that product that your product is so good that they should want to have some type of partnership with you around supporting that product or supporting the company. So it's much more of a two-way conversation. A sales deck, in my mind, is you're sitting there pitching. They might have questions at the end. A corporate partnerships deck is really setting the scene for, what is this deal going to look like? What is the proposed partnership that I'm saying? And what are any key questions that you have? What are key questions that I have? It's more of sort of a question mark style presentation where there's no firm conclusion at the end necessarily, besides, yes, I'm interested in exploring this deal further with you. The difference is, in a very sort of introductory deck, you won't even have probably really firm questions. You'll just go in almost more with something like a sales deck. If it's sort of a second level corporate partnership, then you've probably already figured out what that potential deal could look like and any results that you both are together looking to achieve, and then responsibilities delegation. So to me, this, what I have in front of you right now, is sort of for round 2 corporate partnership, not a 15-minute or 20-minute hi, nice to meet you call, but we've had that call, we've identified some ideas on how we might work together, and now here's the next level of partnership meeting. So you can see the beginning is different. So it's sort of like a proposed deal summary instead of about the company summary, because they already know about the company. And then you go into really the sales deck. And then sort of at the end, instead of just saying, okay, now do you want to be a customer? Instead you say, okay, so do you want to do this deal? If you, assuming you want to, then here's the type of things you'll be responsible for. Here's what I'll be responsible for. And then lastly, any key considerations or risks or open questions that both of us need to figure out before we sign this deal. And then this I'll spend 30 seconds on. An investor deck, you can see all the stars and asterisks. It's a lot different than a sales deck or a corporate partnerships deck, because you have to share a lot of information that you would never share with a customer. For example, you need to talk about your margins. You need to talk about if not only your product is great, but it's actually good business. So who's running your marketing? Who's built your technology? You also need to talk about what your forecast performance looks like. So forecast revenue and how you're going to achieve and get that. So much different than a general sales deck. And I just am showing this to you for anyone that came to the room to talk about an investor deck. This is still going to be really pertinent, because those questions, the burning questions, are still relevant to an investor deck. It's really just the way you structure the outline and a couple key areas that differ here. So this is just for anyone that wants to hear about fundraising. So moving on, I'm going to go now through a sales deck slide by slide by slide, and basically show you how I approach creating these different core topics for a sales deck. And the point is, they're all super custom for your company, but this is one example, and this is a live example of a deck that I worked on with a client that you can see in real life. So this is a sales deck for a company called Wansfer. They're a B2B payment solution that allows US retailers to accept Chinese payment methods. So very high level, Chinese consumers don't use credit cards like we do. They have all these special ways they like to pay, and they have a lot of money to spend. And this company allows Chinese consumers to spend money. These logos here are to show you that the sales deck worked. They have customers like Lamborghini and Sheridan that looked at this very deck that I'm about to show you. So sort of the proof of concept here. So not included in my outline, and just for every deck, is just including a front cover and a back cover. That's sort of just something that everyone does, right? So you have your logo and maybe some graphic with a little bit of a title and the date and time, or sorry, the date and month. So this is the company executive summary that we start with. So basically, what is this company in one page? If I couldn't sit through this entire pitch, what do I need to know? So Wansfer is your gateway to Chinese consumers. That's sort of the zinger headline. And then I really like using titles and subtitles in order to deliver sort of a 1-2 punch. So you not only get to say what you want in the title, but a little bit more punchy information before getting into the body of the slide. So Wansfer is a cross-border payment gateway that enables American retailers to sell direct to and engage with Chinese consumers by accepting their local payment methods. So the addition of that by accepting their local payment methods is important because we're not only saying what the company does, but also very important to note how the company does it. And then we made this custom little graphic that you can see on the right that just helps the eyes absorb the information about what we're showing. And as I mentioned, I want to make sure that whoever I'm talking to does not zone out within the first 2 minutes of my pitch. So I'm making things in the beginning super punchy. So say you didn't even read my little subtitle. You see on this slide that I'm going to increase your revenue and increase your conversion. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe I'll pay attention. Now we go into defining the problem and then of course the solution that we provide as Wansfer. So here you can see the problem is that it's really for the Chinese consumer. Less than 1% of US retailers accept their payment methods. Again, you see some subtitling here and then some punchy bullets at the bottom. So some real issues that they have, like low credit limits, $50,000 limit on wire transfers, and they're upset. You can see the consumer to the left is upset because they cannot figure out how to use their payment method. So that's the problem for the Chinese consumer. Or this is basically an example where you have 2 problems to define. So the Chinese consumer is problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that the US retailer, who is this client that we're pitching to, unable to accept mobile payments, retailers lose sales. So the consumer is either buying less or completely abandons their cart. And again, some punchy bullets on the left, a nice little custom graphic on the right that's showing that this person can't check out. And lastly, we define the problem as sort of macroeconomic. So the first 2 are really keeping it microeconomic. So here's a person who's having a problem. Here's a company who's having a problem. And you know what? The problem is massive and the problem is global. So the title here is A Massive Missed Revenue Opportunity. There's $5 trillion of consumer Chinese spending and less than 1% of that is spent in the US. Couple really, again, high level stats. Just meant to sort of leave you with an eerie problem of you as a retailer are leaving a lot of money on the table. So the solution for you is using Wansfer. It's always using your company. Wansfer allows American brands to accept preferred Chinese payment methods in store and online. Another subtitle, and then how it works. So one thing to point out, you'll notice with my titles is I do this effect called whisper headlines up on the upper left. I use to define the page. So solution, problem, team, competition. And then I use descriptive titling in my titling so that I don't leave you wondering, what am I trying to say with each page? I actually say in the title what I want you to believe on each page. And then the subtitle adds additional details. So we're saying basically Wansfer is going to solve all these problems. And it was important to show that Wansfer isn't just an idea. It's not a made up company. In these blocks, you can see that Wansfer is already integrated with the largest payment systems in the United States and the largest payment retailers in China. And then just this came out with sort of what are the burning questions that a partner might have. So by the way, this is the burning question. Basically, they're saying, you're a little small company. How can I trust you to handle my money if you're really telling me that you might be processing millions and one day billions of dollars of transactions for my company? Can I really trust you as a payment gateway? There's a lot of risk there. So this is where I said the how it works should come right after the solution if the how it works is sort of your secret sauce. And for this company, it is. So how it works is that they basically have partnered with Alipay. Alipay is the world's largest mobile platform. And so they have a very unique relationship with them, basically, where they are, I can't remember exactly, but they are the only Chinese payment gateway that has partnered with Alipay, and Alipay can be super trusted. So what they're really saying is, if you don't trust us, don't worry, you trust Alipay, and Alipay is doing this in partnership with us. And so on the right-hand side, you can see all of this is talking about Alipay. So over 100,000 US merchants, 80% of consumers already use it. And you can see a bunch of logos that actually aren't related to Wansfer. They're related to Alipay though. And this is really, the goal of this is to get that brand association really married strong in the customer's head. So they say, again, exactly what we want to say. So with Alipay as processor, retailers get the trust and infrastructure of a massive global enterprise. All funds move only between Alipay and the retailer. So what they're saying is, and I remember having this conversation with my client, that retailers were getting nervous about their funds flow. But that the truth is that they don't actually ever touch their funds. It's just direct with Alipay. And so I said, okay, why don't we just say it on the slide then? We don't need to leave it up for interpretation. Let's tell them you will not touch their funds. So you don't even have to worry about that fear and concern. Then this is sort of the hit them with, how are you really benefiting me? So Wansfer improves your bottom line. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's just tell them from the very beginning how it will actually help you. So it increases revenue, increases customer conversion, increases customer value, I think that says, and then it also decreases expenses. So actually, all credit cards charge between 2 to 3% anyway, and actually Wansfer charges even less than that. So you can see that not only is it saving you money on an expense basis, but it's also generating revenue for you. So a lot of people want to pay for solutions that either guarantee increased revenue, but not speculatively increased revenue, or guaranteed decreased fees. And this definitely, on the downside, guarantees decreased expenses. And it's not a hard sell to believe that accepting payment that you couldn't accept before will increase revenue. But we just wanted to cover our bases on both ends of the income statement for the customer. Then sort of just showing how it works, it's super seamless. So how this company works is it's just built into your existing POS. It's a little bit of a software that you upload. So we just want to show, look, it's super seamless and easy in store. It's super seamless and easy online. And by the way, it's actually easier than how Americans do it today. And then there's additional add-ons. So when I first started working with this client, and I'm sure you all will find out, it's really hard because I'm sure your company or your solution offers maybe 10 different benefits. But it's about figuring out what is the one benefit that I know 100% they need, or it's not a want, it's a need, and aligning on describing that one benefit and sort of peppering in additional benefits afterwards. That's my approach when I start to get tongue twisted around the value add, because there's just so many ways that the company or solution adds value. So what we did is we pulled out the core reason that someone might be looking for our solution. We described why it was so awesome. And now we're saying, oh, by the way, we have these 3 other add-ons that are incredible. And they actually really, really could boost your revenue if they're used properly, but you don't even need them if you don't want to. So not only does this company offer a payment processing, the way it works in China is it's all through WeChat, which is their largest social network. And it's basically assuming that we used Facebook to pay is how Chinese people use WeChat and WeChat Pay. And what they're saying is they're sucking all that data, basically the equivalent of sucking our Facebook and Instagram data. And you get that if you use this company when they pay. So imagine the customer data that you can now use for marketing, retargeting, and social expansion. And then again, just a little graphic about how this works. And Last but not least, these are just sort of additional check the box. Remember I said at the end, what are some questions that even if they say yes, they're still going to want answered before this party works with me? This is our attempt to get ahead of that. So they're probably going to want to know, what's my customer service look like? Who can I call if I have an issue? Very CFO specific, but how does the cash settle? Will I have access to it as soon as the transaction goes through, or will I have to wait a few days? And hey, what about security, right? You're handling complex systems, payment information, and now social data. I want to make sure that I don't have a security fraud. So this was really sitting down at the very end and thinking, what did we cover? What did we not cover that someone will need to know? And you can see here it's in the back of the deck, because this isn't meant to convince someone to use the product. It's just sort of check the box. And then leaving on, okay, great. So assuming you want to be a customer, what's next? How can I actually become a customer? So for this particular solution, it's 3 to 6 weeks of integration, and we show very cleanly and organized how it works. Thank you, and then a contact email, and that's the end. And that's sort of your generalized sales deck. And I'm just going to flip all the way back to the bulleted list to sort of reframe it one more time. If I can get there. 1 second. Okay. So we followed this almost to a T. It ended up being about 20 slides. So we had a company executive summary. And then we did 3 types of problems. Our solution was now Chinese customers can use their preferred payment methods. The secret sauce, or how it works, if super compelling, that was the partnership that they have with Alipay that gives them the trust that they deserve and will want. Then we showed our customer results. We didn't include any customer quotes, but looking back, I think that would be powerful. Then we showed the product offering, basically how it works and how it looks over 2 slides. Then the additional upside and features and why that's super exciting. We did not show traction because this company was a bit earlier when we did this deck 2 years ago. So that wasn't particularly interesting for this company. Then we showed, did we show pricing? I actually think we didn't show pricing, again, because they were trying to still figure out their pricing. This was sort of a pre-seed style company that I worked with. So they wanted it to be more of a back and forth conversation with the retailer. And then how to sign up, and then key next steps. And we didn't do a team page because the people that were in the room felt like they were going to give their bio enough that they didn't need to do a team page for the slide. So that's sort of just how you can see it from outline and then full out. And then with the few minutes that we have left, I'll just show quickly a corporate partnership deck in the same way, particularly these couple slides that we changed for a corporate partnerships deck. So this corporate partnerships deck is a client I've worked with for 4 years, and we actually used this deck in order to sign Estee Lauder in a massive corporate partnership. So again, that's the proof of this approach. Cover, company logo, executive summary. So here's the big difference. Here I am meeting with Estee Lauder. It's not our first ever meeting, but it's the first time we're really pitching, let's say, the board of directors or the decision maker on what this deal looks like. So I'm creating an executive summary to say, here's the state of the land. Here's some potential problems as to why whatever you're doing by not working with us isn't working for you. Here's how we think we can solve your problem. And here's the value that we're going to create for you and us by working together. Then it goes through very similarly how we just did the sales deck. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's our secret sauce as to why our solution is going to work where other people's solution didn't work before. Here's the actual benefits to the corporate and a hard dollar amount quantified for one particular use case. So again, remember we showed that also for the sales deck. People want to save money or make money. So just give them an example, show them the dollars that they'll save. It could be an estimate, just footnote your assumptions, but make some type of analysis about what the actual financial impact is going to be to someone that uses this. Or if you're a nonprofit, what the potential good impact is going to be, even on a dollar basis, if someone decides to give you money. And then how it works in very bite-sized steps, how it works in an equity diagram that helps you really take in the information that someone's pitching towards you. And then a little summary of the solution. So right now we've done sort of, here's what the corporate's doing, here's what the corporate would be doing with us, and just let's give it to them again, the numbers of exactly how our solution is going to make it better. A summary of all the benefits that this corporate is going to have if they choose to do this deal. And then lastly, corporate responsibilities and considerations. So we're not, as you know, with all corporate partnerships, again, going back to the Target one, Target is going to have some responsibility. It's not just a customer buying your lipstick and then they have the responsibility to use your lipstick. Target is going to have to figure out, am I going to co-market this? What is that campaign going to look like? Am I going to do something special for them in store? How much do I want to order? And is there a shelf life? Do I need to worry about this product expiring? So there's a bunch of responsibilities in a corporate partnerships deck that they're actually going to have to be responsible for and also consider. There may be a couple risks for them to consider. I mentioned to you that I always want to mitigate risks. However, there still could be a few things that genuinely they will want to consider. And I prefer to actually put that on the slide and not play dumb about it so that I look really informed and like I'm thinking ahead for the corporate. And then want to discuss any additional Q&A. And we're basically have 20 minutes left for Q&A. I'll just show you in 1 minute an investor deck. This investor deck convinced the chain smokers to invest in this company amongst other investors, but I thought this was the most fun logo. And the core differentiation again is proving historical financials and proving forecast financials. So it's way more bankery, investment bank, investment style. None of the financial information would you ever typically put in the either two decks. But the purpose is I want to convince my audience that I'm doing great financially and I'm going to do great in the future. And here's why. So if you've sold a lot of products over the past 12 months, leading with how you've sold so many of those products, as you can see here, is always great. And then sort of just going through how big the market is that you can sell to a bunch of customers. And then how, again, problem, solution, your vision for the future of the company, your approach for how you're going to show that vision. And I'm going to click through a few more and showing you basically then also a financial appendix. So here's how we've done historically, cutting the data in a way that looks like you're going down to up as fast as possible. And then here's where we're going forward. Here are some key action items, what we're going to do. And here's our financial model forecast. And here's how it looks from a sort of forecast financial perspective. So that's super high level. We could do another webinar talking about investor decks all on their own, but some very different slides in here, all related really to financial modeling history and financial modeling forecasting. And that's it. So before you go, make your content, copyright it, design it, and look at it before you send it out. You know, take one day, come back to it with fresh eyes, make sure that your titling makes sense. You have consistent branding everywhere. You're paying attention to detail, that your logo is on every single slide, that you have page numbers on every slide. And then lastly, practice your pitch and deliver it in 10 minutes or less to leave ample time for Q&A. And that being said, we have 18 minutes for Q&A here, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Kelly. There was so much in there to digest. And I know a few folks were asking, we will be sharing the YouTube link, and then a modified version of the deck will be shared in the description to the YouTube. But let's jump right in, because I think there's a few compelling questions that I want to ask. So I think one question, Kelly, and this came up when we were working with our fellows. Someone asked, my company is between concept and notable sales. How do I focus on numbers if my company, my business doesn't quite have compelling numbers yet?
So that's a great question. You always need to prove traction. Traction doesn't always mean sales. Traction can mean I had an idea and I built it to a product that actually works. Or it was just me and now I have 10 people. I put together a team. Or I obviously had 0 customers before. I have 0 customers now, but I've had 50 conversations with customers and they're in my pipeline. And hey, here's a funnel of the customers in my pipeline. I'm talking to these people. These people I've had 2 meetings with. These people I've had 3 meetings with, I think will sign. So there's always a way to prove you've done something. It doesn't have to be revenue. And for people in your case, I typically do a 1 summary traction slide per area. So I'll say team, built a 3-person team, fundraise if it happened, raised $200,000, product went from idea to MVP. So just thinking through a way you can convince someone that you've still done a lot in a little bit of time, but maybe your product is just still pre-revenue or still sort of in beta.
Yeah. Does press, Kelly, count as kind of noteworthy traction, or is that something different?
Yeah, I would say that's interesting. That you could definitely put that in. Again, I said like 1, 2, 3 areas. Press could be one, press coverage. I mean, the funny thing about press coverage is I feel like a lot of people know at this point it's become a bit pay to play. Right. So listen, if you burned up 80% of your cash flow on PR, I wouldn't be that happy to know that, assuming this is for an investor. But if you can figure out a way to make the press seem genuine, or if it's really great people in your field, I would definitely, that's a good idea to use press.
Yeah, that's great. Another question that a few people asked in different ways, but I think what is the different ways you would make this deck if you don't have a product, but you're offering a service or a consultancy? Like how would that deck look different?
So I would think that it's very similar, except instead of like just replace your company or your product with your service. So I would still follow the same exact outline. And instead of describing an Oreo company, you're describing a services company. So for example, the problem about my business is that no one is servicing small businesses like investment banks are serving corporates. So what is the solution? Take an ex-investment banker and build an investment bank for startups. How will this help you? It will increase your revenue by getting you more customers. It will increase your longevity by getting you more investors. It's laying it out exactly the same, but replace company with service in your brain as you're using the materials.
And do you include a price list when you're doing your decks or no?
I never do, as you might know. So it depends. If you're a service that truly, it's so clear you charge this and this for that, you should. My service, for example, can be so little or so large. It's so bespoke. And we also take sometimes equity and advisory shares. So I intentionally don't share my prices because I'm also not sure. I definitely have different prices for different styles of clients, depending on me kind of feeling out how someone is. So if you're a sort of a larger services business with bespoke contracts, I would suggest not putting your pricing in the deck.
Yeah. And we have quite a few women in our network whose business includes some type of social impact or do good. In what type of deck would you include that information, and how would you include it?
So it depends, I guess, because it depends how core to your business there is actually impact and do good. So I know across the fellowship program, we encountered some businesses that truly exist for the do good versus, oh, we donate 5% of our profits. And there's a big difference there. If it's truly existing for, then it should come out almost through every slide as truly being the mission of your business and how you achieve that mission. If there's a little bit of sprinkled do good, I don't think it comes out in more than one slide. It depends. Again, if you're talking about corporate partnerships or a sales deck, but let's just say for a sales deck,
Mhm.
it's kind of like a throwaway one sentence, I would say. It depends also. If you're a consumer brand, then sometimes people really love the floweriness that comes with a give back company. But to me, 5% of your proceeds is still not so core. So you might mention it in the bottom half of a slide. Or if you really want to highlight one program because it's super awesome that you did, maybe again, just one slide, but no more than that.
Okay, great. And there are quite a few questions, Kelly, around the design of slides. So people ask, what software do you use? What software do you recommend? Do you recommend hiring someone to design your deck? I know that cost is and budget tends to be an issue there, but curious of your recommendation. And then a few questions about graphics. Can you download graphics for free? What happens when you run into copyright issues? So just if you can speak a little generally about the design portion of the deck.
Sure. So basically, I, of course, I'm going to say everyone should hire a professional designer.
Yeah.
Feel free to work with me. The one thing I don't do is the design. So I have the content in place, and then my graphic designers are really brand creators. So the one thing I always want to nail home, like my designers are not little PowerPoint editors. They're actually looking at your brand identity and thinking, how can I infuse this brand in my deck? And I think that that's super important on a pitch deck. Now, because I also see people asking about pricing in the comments, I'd say full custom design of your branded deck starts around $3,000 for a deck, just so you have some sense of what we're talking about. And it depends, of course, on your cash flow, if you can afford something like that. But the reason I think it's always worth it is that once you have that branded deck, it doesn't just die. You're going to use it multiple times. You can edit it, and it can be your framework of any deck. So you have your standard deck, and then you can make 10 offshoots of that deck. But it's very hard if you're not a true graphic designer to have the visualization of how to carry out your brand on a deck.
Totally.
That being said, my designer uses Keynote, which is basically a PowerPoint for Macs. And then we can either keep it in Keynote or export it to PowerPoint. I have met very, very few designers that actually design in PowerPoint. And then I also have a designer that does Google Slides designing as well. Any designer that wants to do it in Figma, Adobe, anything weird.
Yeah. What about Canva, Kelly?
Yeah. Okay. Canva's the one that I'm not really familiar with.
Yeah.
The problem with Canva, Figma, all those things is that they're not easily editable if someone doesn't have source knowledge of how to use it. So the reason we always stick to PowerPoint and Keynote is because I know my founder is going to be able to edit it afterwards. Now, if you're the founder and you're the only person editing it and you love Canva, you can use Canva, but just know that somebody else probably doesn't know how to use Canva and it will be stuck in there. And also don't get tricked by a design firm that's going to design you an asset that afterwards you can't edit it. And so you have to pay them every single time you want. That's a disaster. And I feel like we have clients that come to us like, help, my file's stuck and trapped in this. And I'm like, I can't help you. I have to recreate the whole thing for you to use it.
Yeah.
And then on terms of downloading stuff, so there are some different websites you can search that have good photography. So if you use Google stock photography, I feel like usually you have to pay for that stuff. But with the rise of platform like Medium and specialized blogging platforms, you can even go on Medium and there's a bunch of links to cool, really good photography sources that are free. They basically just ask that you source the photography. And then the graphics I showed basically as screen share, those were all custom made. I mean, they're literally tables and shapes with things on top of them. So those were just custom made in PowerPoint or Keynote.
Okay, great. Really helpful. Another question that came through was around approaching cultural differences when approaching international fundraising. Are there things that you need to, change around depending on audience, language? I think this also, like this question was particular around international audiences, but I think in general, cultural differences, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I mean, I would not feel comfortable personally pitching in a culture that I didn't know anything about that culture. So I would probably feel comfortable pitching in Europe, though I will say a lot of European founders and VCs want to work with me because they're like, I don't know how to pitch to a US investor. It's not really because of a cultural reason. It's just more stylistic.
Hmm.
So I think, but the one thing you have on your side, if assuming this person's from the US, is still people generally think the US is hot and cool. So you can kind of get away with using a US style internationally as long as it's not offensive. But in a place like Japan, for example, I know that business tactics are very different. And I would never go to Japan without having a Japan liaison talk through how I might approach it. I think that the American way is probably way too direct for Japan. And you would totally modify how you go about asking. And you should just speak with someone who's actually from that country and have them help them be on your side. So also Wansford, the sales deck I showed, the founder's Chinese, his English is okay. He just was not coming off well to partnerships and salespeople. So they actually hired in a business development guy who that presentation I showed you, I work with the two of them to work on it, but that American guy is actually the one doing the pitching because for cultural reasons and differences, it actually wasn't coming off well for the founder to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another question in here around market research about customer or potential customers. Where would that go in a deck? And that probably varies depending on if it's a corporate partnership, sales, or an investor deck, but where does that kind of market research fit in?
Yeah, so I'm gonna think again, that's a bit more for an investor deck, because if you're already talking to your customer, you don't need to tell them how you're gonna find your customer.
Yeah.
Kind of similarly with corporate partnerships, maybe you have one slide on the target demographic of the customer that just says, females age this to this, likes this and this, has also bought whatever, resonates with these brands, and has this average income and lives on the East Coast or the West Coast, something like that. Just so that target again can have some sense of who this product is meant to be marketed to so that they can help you co-market it. If it's an investor deck, that's where you spend a bit more time. What you want to say is that there's tons of customers that want this. So even if the truth is maybe only 10 million, 100% want it, find logical reasons to explain why another 50 million will probably want it, or another 500 million will want it in 3 years once the world changes in some type of way. So my source for finding that information is Google. I work with founders that provide it sometimes, but if they're sometimes not getting it, something's not clicking, I can find everything from Google, reading research reports that are available online. Every now and again, I'll tap into my old banker friends and get them to pull equity research reports for me that cover that particular industry, and I'll read those industry reports, but it's not 100% necessary. You could definitely get away with free access if you wanted to, though it's great if you can read industry reports that are paid, but I wouldn't recommend paying for them yourself.
It's great advice. And I think on the flip side, when you're pitching to customers, how do you champion yourself as a founder and a business without making it all about you? And so how do you kind of strike that balance?
I mean, you need to make sure you're not coming off as cocky. However, you should be cocky about your business. Like, it's not really about you. It's about your business. The about you is just why you are going to be great at delivering this business and this service. And you spend about a minute or less talking about that. And typically that's either at the very beginning or at the very end when you're maybe introducing yourself to whoever's there. Or you're just summarizing it with, okay, I've just pitched you my business. Now, just so you know, here's the team behind it. And this is why the team collectively is great at delivering this business. But it's not just like, I'm Kelly Lyons, I'm great, random reasons why. It's, I'm Kelly Lyons, and here's my background that makes me suitable for delivering my solution to you.
Yeah.
It's always with the angle of the solution, not the solution being the person. If it's a service, is business, of course, that person needs to be highly applicable to deliver the service, but you don't talk about things outside of why you're great at that service.
Yeah. Last question here. And from Camilla, I'm going to rephrase it a bit, but I think kind of like similarly to cultural differences, I think she's struggling. She's a 3-time successful founder. She's made money in other sectors, but she's a woman. And so of a certain age, and she feels like that's kind of a barrier to her pitching. And so curious for you as a female entrepreneur, what advice, guidance would you recommend to women founders who find themselves in this situation?
I guess I would ask myself, like, ageism. What is ageism? What is the actual fear that's I'm not sure how old, Kimberly, you are.
Yeah, we're not sure, but I think it's a good question for our audience.
Yeah. Like, why are people afraid of older looking women? Is it because they think they're going to retire sometime soon? That could be why. Or they think perhaps they have less energy. I don't know, right? Because I don't believe it. But I would take a realistic thought about, they might think like I'm not as hungry and I won't dedicate myself to this. Maybe that's the issue, or I'll want to retire. And then I would, again, that's a risk. I would think about the mitigant of that, like just coming across so energetic, not annoying, but very energetic, very dedicated. Maybe try to figure out how to make it a bit more mission driven, not necessarily for give back, but mission to your heart and why you're dying after 30 years of the workforce. This is it. And you finally found it. Truly showing passion and commitment, long-term commitment to the goal, making it sort of bigger than yourself, I think would help them think that you're not committed or that you're not going to walk away. And also, I think just, again, talking about how your background makes you so perfect for what you're doing. So you have maybe 20 years experience or 30 years where everybody else has 5, and talk about how that should be really looked at as a huge asset that other people don't have, because it's very unique to see a woman at your age in this position.
Great note to end on. Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with members